yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, last time I'll kind of reiterate this. CodePen account, make sure that's created. Join our Discord, it's in the Zoom chat. Hello. Um, and yeah, let's go ahead and get started here on our event. So this is Code On, Intro to Web Development, and this is our HTML and CSS workshop. Again, while I'm going over concepts today, if you do have any questions, speak up, interrupt me. I don't get offended. I'd rather get your question out than me rambling on. And unfortunately, I can't turn on my camera in Zoom because my camera feed's going to YouTube. But yeah, speak up. Today, what we'll be going over is we're not going to be building a fancy web page. We're just going to be going over concepts of HTML and CSS. So I don't want you to come out of this workshop thinking like, oh, I'm going to have this awesome web page to show off to everybody, which, you know, you might. But I'd rather you come out having a good beginner's base, so that way if you do free online tutorials, you'll be able to continue your knowledge and whatnot. I will tell you, w3schools.com is one of my personal favorites for free online tutorials. I'll go ahead and copy and paste that in the Zoom chat. Also over in YouTube. And after this, go through their tutorials on HTML and CSS. And then after you get a good base in those two, move on to a programming language like JavaScript. Or you can try Python or any of these, but JavaScript should be a good next step for you. It's the language of the web. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. Any questions before we get started? Awesome. So, what is web development? It's the process of developing web pages and websites and web applications to be hosted on the internet. It can be anything as simple as a blog, where you just have text and a picture you want to display, or it can be something really complex like Facebook, where it has database users. You can comment, post things, delete. Anything to be hosted online is pretty much web development. How do you make a web page or a website or application? Well, you need to use HTML to structure that. HTML is your structuring of your web page or application. It's like your scaffolding. It's like the bones for people, if you think about it that way. You need some styling. That's where CSS comes in. It's like the makeup and clothing and whatnot. You can think about it that way. And then you also need some functionality, like a programming language like JavaScript. That would be like the veins and muscles and whatnot to make things functional. And once you put all those together, you get a fancy website or web page. Once you get it looking the way you want and you put all the files together and you want to host it online for everyone to see, oh, this is some simple HTML and CSS. So on the left here is HTML, on the right is CSS. If this looks foreign to you, that's perfect. After this workshop, this will not look as foreign. But once you get everything looking the way you want, what you do is you take all your files and you put them on or host them to a server. And that server acts as a home base where your website or web application lives. And then anyone with a web browser and a device, a web browser like Google Chrome, Firefox, Internet Edge, don't get off Explorer if you're using it. Safari's okay. Opera, yeah, that's a good one. I'm using Google Chrome. It'll help you follow along a little bit easier if you use that. But anyone with a web browser and a device like a cell phone, a computer, tablet, can now access your website or web application because you have it hosted onto your server and it's put on the internet for everyone to see. So that's a very brief, basic overview of web development. There's a lot of things that go in between there, but we'll be just structuring a simple web page today. You can actually see anybody's website's code. If you're wondering like how they built that website or anything, like if you go to any website, like we went to NASA and we wanted to see how they built this, what you can do is right click and go to inspect. Now if you're on a yeah, just right click and inspect. If you're on a Mac, it's Command Alt C, if I'm not mistaken. Command Shift or Command Alt. I think Windows is instead of Command, it's Control. But yeah, Control Shift C or F12 if you're on a Windows, and then if you're on a Mac, it's Command Shift C. You can kind of pull up your developer tools and see how their web page is structured. You have your HTML here on the left, you kind of have your CSS styling here on the right, and you can actually manipulate this stuff. And actually, I'm going to go over developer tools real quick because we're going to be using these a lot throughout coding today. So again, if you just right click and do inspect, it'll bring up your developer tools here on the right and left. I don't know if I click on something. Yeah. The major one that we're going to be using today is the one here on the far left. It has a square with an arrow on it. This lets you kind of grab different elements or different things on the web page. And you can change those. You can see what they're like. You can see this is an anchor tag. It's that A, which we'll go over those more in a little bit. You can see the color of the font, which is white, the size, the padding. You can see everything CSS and tag-wise what they use to kind of build out this little container here, this little box. What's also nice about that is that if I wanted to grab something and change something, I can. So if you're working on your own personal website and you want to change stuff, you can actually do it in your developer tools without changing your code. So if I select this, here is the HTML here on the left side. If I right click that and do edit HTML, I can actually come in here and now, you know, say whatever I want, like space is awesome and code on is the best coding workshop for beginner, or whatever you want to say. Now if I click out of that, oops, sorry, that didn't work. Let me try that again. I go to edit HTML and change this to, we don't want to grab that A closing tag, to whatever I want, and then that will now be displayed here. I change it, it has whatever I want. I'm not actually hacking the website, I'm just changing the display of what I'm seeing, and then if I refresh, that will go back to whatever was there before. So that's a really important tool, is the square with an arrow. We'll be using that a lot today. One other thing I'll show you is if you want to see what a website looks like on different devices, you use this toggle device toolbar, which is right next to it. If I select that, I can see what it looks like. Let's say on a, you can see here it says mobile S. That's a small mobile cell phone with 320 pixels wide. If I select that, this is what their website would look like on a small cell phone. I can do a medium cell phone, large, a tablet, laptop, a large laptop, and a 4K huge desktop screen. So that will really work well as if you're using like media queries, which we'll go over a little bit later. You want to design your website or application to look great on all different types of devices. And that's how you can see what it looks like on different types of devices with this toggle device toolbar here. That's kind of the only real two that we'll be using today. Two other ones that I will share you that's just kind of cool is network. Under network, let me blow this up a little bit. Under network, you can actually change the speed of your website. So if you want to, now in America, some places don't have 5G. They have 3G or slow 3G. You can select that, refresh, and see what this website would look like if someone had 3G and they were loading your website. You can see it takes 6,000 milliseconds, which is pretty fast. But I want to go no throttling. So that is nice. You can kind of mess around with that, but like I said, we'll just be using these first two. And then the last one I'll show you is security. You want to make sure any website you're on, and it also says it up in the toolbar, this little HTTPS. That S is very important because it lets you know that is a secure website that you're on. If you're on a website that doesn't have that S, and you're giving them personal information, like you're creating an account or you're giving them your credit card information or whatnot, payment system, that information isn't secure. You might not want to give them that information because it would be a little bit easier for hackers to get in and kind of get that information. So whatever website or where you're located, even in your toolbar up here, make sure that it has that HTTPS. You can also see it down here in the developer tools. And that's what's cool about that as well is if a site is not secure, what Google, Yahoo, and most search engines will do is they will, if someone's searching for a website, they're going to post all the secure websites first before all the non-secure websites. So if you want to be, located higher above other websites, make sure your application or website is secure. So that is nice. Like I said, we'll be using pretty much this toggle device toolbar, and also under elements we'll be using the select element icon, which we'll go over that more here, what elements are in just a little bit. So yeah, on anyone's website you can just go ahead and inspect, and it'll show you how they kind of built that. You can actually see the raw data as well too, but we'll go over that maybe a little bit later. So how do you build out a website? Well, you need a text editor. We'll be using CodePen today, and what we'll be doing here on CodePen is under pen, I'll just select a pen, and this will act as our text editor for us. We have our HTML file, we have our CSS file, and our JavaScript file. It sets all that up for us. It links everything together, so we don't have to worry about things not being linked properly. CodePen takes care of that for us, and CodePen actually acts as a web browser too. That's this bottom section over here. So it's all in one. But typically what you would be using is a text editor for that. Text editor by default, Windows is Notepad or Notepad++. For Macs it's TextEdit, or for Linux it's Vim. But what I would suggest using is not using the default ones. Use more of a integrated development environment, or IDE. This is more of a VS Code, Atom, Sublime. At DevPoint Labs, pretty much the instructors and TAs and students are using VS Code. It's kind of the more popular one right now, built in JavaScript. It's a really good one. At the end of this workshop, I'll be using VS Code to show you how you kind of take your code from CodePen and actually put it into a text editor and link all your files. But as you can see, why I would say use VS Code, Atom, or Sublime rather than the default ones that come with your computer is because this is a default text editor. It's just a plain white background, black text. It's not really that visual pleasing. If you use an IDE or text editor, this is Sublime. You can see it'll color code your tags for you. It'll color code things. It'll if you have an error or a typo, typically it will underline it in red. Our file structure looks cute. It's got these like icons. There's just a lot more that comes with an actual IDE rather than a default text editor. So after this workshop, if you don't have your own text editor, look into downloading VS Code is my personal favorite. I used Sublime a lot before that. I tried out Atom, but I didn't really like it as much. It's still good. All of them are good. But yeah, but we'll be using CodePen today to act as our text editor and web browser all in one, which does make it a little bit more difficult to use our developer tools to inspect, but we can still use it. And at the end of the workshop, I will show you how to take your CodePen and put it actually into a text editor. Any questions so far? We're going to jump into our HTML. Any questions on overview of web development, using text editors, how you can see a website's code? Unmute yourself, speak up if you do, or post it in chat. Crystal clear, thank you. Awesome. So let's jump into it. Let's start with HTML. HTML is the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in the web browser. HTML describes the structure of our web page through tags. tags are like containers. It's really important to understand is things are just really rectangle square containers that we'll be building out with HTML. And it tells the web browser about the information that they contain. So if I look here as the example, here's an H1 tag. The opening has this less than and greater than, and the closing tag has this / to let the text editor web browser know this is the end of the tag. Not all tags need this. There are a few tags that are self-closing, which we'll go over here in just a little bit. But everything from the opening tag to the closing tag I'm going to refer to as the element. And what the contents inside of the opening and closing tag contain is going to be the element. So you'll hear some, if you do some tutorials or whatnot, you hear tag or element used a lot. I'm going to refer to the element as the opening to closing and everything it contains. And then the actual tag itself is the in between this less than or greater than. And if you're wondering, like, how do I know what tags to use? W3 Schools, like I said, is a great one. If you just Google search, HTML tags, W3 Schools will pop up because I use that a lot. You can click on that. I'll send this link out through Zoom. Also in YouTube. And you can see here all the tags that you can use to structure your web page or application. And there are a ton. I've probably used about maybe a fraction of these, but you can go through, click on an individual tag, and it'll give you more information. Today we'll be using just the kind of basic generic tags, like a nav tag, an anchor tag, which is the A tag here. So yeah, after this, go through these and kind of read up on the different types of tags. You don't need to memorize all the tags, you just need to know where to go to find the information, because I mean, how long would it take you to memorize all these tags and all the information about it? Yeah, probably a long time. You just need to know where to reference the tags, and then if I want to know more about like a samp tag, I don't even know what that is, a sample tag, I can click on that and it'll give me more descriptions about that tag and how to use it, and also kind of a little try it yourself thing over here. But try that out later on. Let me go back to HTML. Perfect. So HTML acts like containers. They contain information to be displayed. From opening to closing, I'm going to refer to that as the element. And some tags do not need a closing tag. Sometimes they're self-closing. But now here's just an example. Everything, if you are using a text editor, instead of using CodePen, everything you text to be displayed is going to go in between the opening and closing body. I'll show you that later at the end when I kind of pull up my text editor and I got a notification. But yeah, this is just kind of to show you that these are just rectangle square containers that contain information to be displayed to the web browser. So let's go ahead and hop into our CodePen. It should look very similar to mine. I'm going to close out this JavaScript section, so I'm just going to kind of go in between here in this middle section and pull that to the right. Same with our CSS here. I'm not going to be using that yet, so I'm going to pull it all the way to the right. This bottom part area acts as our web browser, so I'm going to pull that up just a little bit. And I'm going to start typing here into our HTML section. Let's see, we have a heading, P, label, input button. So I'm going to kind of copy that. I'm actually going to wrap everything here into a div tag. So I'm going to, and what's nice with text editors is there's shortcuts on, instead of having to type, less than div, close that, have my closing div / div, that's a lot of typing I can do, and I can kind of mess that up real easily. A lot of text editors come with shortcuts. After this, I would say look up Emmet and kind of go through the shortcuts of text editors, because if you can code faster, then you can just bust out a lot more projects and it saves you time and money. You can make more money if you code faster. You should know that like Control C or Command C if you're on a Windows is copy, Control V is paste, Control Z is like undo, Control X is cut, and then if you're on a Windows, instead of Control, it's Command. But nice thing with text editors, if I know the name of the tag I want to use, I can just type the name. Like I'm going to use a div tag, so if I type lowercase, it can't be uppercase, div, and hit tab right after, it'll auto-complete that tag for me. So that's nice, so I don't have like any spelling errors, or if I accidentally had a backslash instead of a forward slash, or I didn't include that, that automatically adds it for me. So again, if you know the name of the tag that you want to use, you just type the name, and typically they're all lowercase, they're not uppercase. And then you hit tab right after. If I were to do div, hit space, and then go back and try to hit tab, oh, it still works. Never mind. That does work. So yeah, and then you can see my cursor now is in between this opening and closing div tag. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to type an H1 for a heading tag, the kind of the biggest heading. Yes, I know I have some changes. I'm just going to type in between here heading, or type whatever you'd like, whatever, doesn't matter. Underneath that H1, I'm going to have a P tag, so I type the letter P, hit tab, it auto-completes that for me, and this is a paragraph. Let's do an input tag, INPUT, hit tab, and it what's nice about input tags is they don't need a closing tag, they're self-closing. You can see it has this little box down here now I can type into. It's my little input. What else did we do on that other one? I think we had a button tag. If I type in button in between there, if I do like click me, now I have this little button that says click me. It doesn't really go anywhere or do anything, which we'd have to set that up later. But what do you notice how they're being displayed? Does anyone notice what's going on with the display of these kind of tags, or the information they contain? Yep, it's from the top. Yep, they kind of line up at the top here. This is the H1 tag. It has a bold text. I didn't tell it to be bold. That's just the kind of the contents of an H1 tag. It has some settings. From top to bottom, yep, it is from top to bottom. This paragraph text is a little bit smaller because it's a paragraph. It shouldn't be as big as a heading. So the web browser is interpreting this to be smaller text because I'm using a P tag. What else do you notice? This input right here is it below the, yes, Stephen, that is an awesome assumption. He said, I wonder why the button isn't below the input. Correct, because some tags are, you can see here this label tag is next to this input, which is next to this button, but this heading and this paragraph kind of take up the full width. That's because tags can either be inline or block elements. They have two display types. Inline elements only take up the space that is necessary and do not start a new line. Example of inline elements are anchor tags, button tags, image, input, span, text area. Block elements start a new line and take up the full width that is available. Example of block elements are article, div, footer, form, nav. There's a bunch. So heading, if I go in here and I click on my web browser, I go and inspect. Again, because I'm using, I want to get off my toggle device toolbar. Because I'm using CodePen as my web browser, my developer tools are a little bit janky. But if I go ahead and select this element, little button here, the square with the arrow on it, I can kind of, come on, get in there. There we go. I can see here, here's my H1. I can see it because that kind of purple color will, oops, my touch screen, I touched my screen. that purple is going to tell me the name of the tag. I'm using an H1 tag. I can tell it tells me the colors using black. The font is 32 pixels. It tells me its margin, which we'll go over that here in a little bit. And I can see it takes up the full width of my web browser. That's because it is a block element. Same with the paragraph tag. It takes up the full width. But this input tag is an inline element. It's only going to take up the space necessary and allow the next element to line up next to it, which a button tag is also the same. So if I put, so let me close out of this so you can see it better. So if I, next to the button, if I had like another H1, and it said like a second heading or something, it's going to line up underneath it because it is a block element. It wants to take up the full width and have its own kind of area. Later on, when we get into Flexbox and CSS, we'll be able to change that if we want the things to line up inline or block or whatnot. But by default, there are two different display types for HTML tags. They're either inline or block. Any questions on that? It's kind of pretty straightforward. Listing. Awesome. Next we'll get into nesting, parent-to-child kind of relationships. Child elements are nested exactly one container in from the parent. For instance, that's not important. Children refer to the markup inside the opening and closing tags. This can be text, another element. HTML embraces the concept of nesting or parent-to-child relationship. So I'm going to go ahead and delete, actually I'm going to delete some of this. And I'm just going to show you a demonstration. You don't need to follow along with this part. I'm just trying to show you the kind of concepts here. So don't type what I'm doing, just kind of focus and because I'm going to delete this stuff anyway. I'm going to use an article tag, inside my article tag, I'll have another H1. That's my second, or just say heading. Okay. Inside this article, I'm going to do like an unordered list, and I'm going to have like 3 lines of stuff. And apple, I don't know, banana, and inside here, I'm actually going to put an ordered list with a line of, I don't know, burger. So you can see what nesting is let me go ahead and use my annotate. So here's our opening and closing div tag. Okay, its direct children is this H1 because it's nested one container in, and this article. Okay, so here's the H1. Oh, actually, H1 closes right there. Let me undo. This article here, opening and closings right here. Its direct children is this H1 and this UL. Nested inside this UL, it has direct children of apple, banana, and OL. Inside the OL nested, its direct child is this burger. So when things are contained inside other elements, that's called nesting. And I can kind of change the display type of how they're being displayed as well too. The reason why a lot of people use div tags is because they're blank canvases. They're not going to change the display type of things that they contain. Here, let me get off my annotate. Oh, clear. Oh, how do I get rid of that? Oh, there you go. Sorry about that. So here I can see this first heading has bigger text than this second heading, but why? That should be the same size and same font. Well, it's because this second heading is contained or nested inside of an article tag. And the web browser reads this like, hey, this is the most important heading because it's the first one. And because this H1 is contained inside this article, that's not as important, so it changes the font size of that to be displayed. Let me go ahead and inspect to show you that. Boom. So you can see here this first heading, it's an H1 tag, the color is black. The font size is 32 pixels. The second heading, font size, is 24 pixels because it's nested inside of an article tag, and the web browser will interpret that as like, hey, that heading's not as important as the other heading because it's nested deeper inside other elements. So that's why sometimes when you nest elements inside other elements and they change its display and change its settings, that's the reason why. Same thing here. I have this unordered list of apple and banana. That's why they have bullet points next to it. And because this burger is contained inside the UL and contained inside an OL, it's pushed even further to the right. It's accepting padding from the UL and the OL, which we'll go over padding and margin here in just a little bit. So what I really want you to understand is as you nest elements inside other elements, it can change its display. It can change how far over it's pushed from the left if it has padding or margin. Margin, just a quick explanation, margin is spacing in between elements. Padding is spacing inside that element, which I'll go over that more here in a little bit. But as you nest elements inside others, it can change the display of that. Yeah, that's perfect. Goes into our box model, which is padding and margin. So again, if you look at this kind of example of a box model, it can be difficult to understand, but the content here is the content what the element contains, like the text or whatever's inside the tag. The padding is going to be spacing inside that element. So if you want to space things away from the border of the element or center or whatnot, you would use padding to give spacing inside your element. And then we have a border that is the border of our element. You can give width to your border, you can give color, and then outside the border, outside the element, is margin. That's spacing in between other elements. So when I look back over here, and this can kind of be a little bit confusing when you're working with spacing in between elements because margin acts a little bit differently. Margin, I'll show you here actually in this example. So here's my UL, okay? It has, if I click on it and I scroll down here on this left side, I can see the content is, I don't know, 538 pixels by 45 pixels. It has a padding here of 40 pixels. Padding is inside the element, and that's inside, and it's giving me space away from the edge, 40 pixels. And then margin is the outside, spacing in between other elements. So in between my H and my UL, that's going to be the orange-ish color here. That's margin. Now, padding is going to pass down to, so this UL here gives 40 pixels of padding to apple and banana. Also gives 40 pixels of padding to burger. But burger also gets another 40 from this UL. So that's why burger is pushed over 40 and another 40 because it's inheriting 40 pixels of padding from the UL. It's like grandparent. And then also inheriting 40 pixels of padding from its parent, its direct parent, which is this OL. So that's why it's pushed over so much further. So as you nest elements inside other elements, just know that it can change how things look. It can change where they are, which later on I'll show you how you can zero out all padding and margin. But understand that margin is spacing in between elements and padding is spacing inside the element. Margin here, you can see from our heading, has 19.2 pixels. The margin of our UL has 16 pixels. Margin doesn't add, man, what is the word I'm looking for? In between elements with margin, it's not going to give more margin. So it's not giving 19 and 16 like it does with padding, because this padding gave 40 and then Burger accepted 40. Margin's going to overlap in between elements. So if you give an element margin of like 30 pixels and another element next to it a margin of 10 pixels, it's not going to be 40 pixels away from each other. It's only going to be 30 pixels because margin overlaps. But padding does not overlap. It's going to pass down its padding to the other elements that it's contained. That might be a little confusing, but the more you work with a box model, just understand margin overlaps, and it'll take place whatever the biggest margin is, and then padding kind of passes down, and you have to evaluate for that, which I probably confused a lot of you as beginners, but understand the basic of it. Padding is separation inside your element. Margin is spacing outside your element. Welcome, Greg. Welcome, welcome. Any questions there on kind of the box model or nesting? I can definitely go over that again and kind of explain it a little bit better. But as long as you understand the core concept of padding and spacing inside the element and margin outside, that's really what you're looking for. We don't have a border on any of these, so there's no real border, but you can give these elements borders as well too. And border is kind of the edge of your element. What's up, Greg? You have a question? Yeah, it's actually being streamed on YouTube Live right now, and it's going to be up by Monday. I'm going to go in there, and instead of posting the whole video, I'm going to splice it up and kind of give timestamps of when I talk about certain things. So if you do want to go back through this video, yeah, it will be up on DevPoint Labs YouTube. DevPoint Labs, yep, the 3 hours, and it'll be like a 3-hour video, but I'll have timestamps of when I talk about things that you can kind of skip towards. You're fine. No worries. No problem. No, thanks for speaking up too. I appreciate that. What I'm going to do is copy into the Zoom chat. Again, I'm going to copy our Discord info, so you can join our Discord. So if I need to send code to you, I can't send it through Zoom chat. That's why I would use Discord. And you can join our Discord community. And then the other thing is CodePen. I'm just creating a new CodePen. If you go to CodePen.io, you create an account. It's free. Where I'm located is, and you can actually see other people's code. Like if you're at CodePen and I was looking at this guy's, I can click on it. I can see his CSS. It's got a lot of JavaScript, I bet, because this is pretty cool. And I can see how he built this, and I can see the code he used to build that. What I'm doing today, Greg, is I'm doing a pen. You can just, after you create an account, you select pen, and it has the file structure already set up for you. This acts as your text editor and web browser in one. If you're using like a text editor like VS Code, Atom, or Sublime, you would have to set up your file structure and link everything together, which does take time, and it's good to learn that as a beginner. But for this workshop, I'm just going to use CodePen because it links all the file structure for us. So yeah, that's basically just to get you caught up real quick. But yeah, any other questions on that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, we're coding. I'm not going to be copying and pasting as much. I'm just showing you concepts with this workshop. I'm not going to have a fancy page for you to build out. I'm just going over the basics of HTML and CSS, what you need to know as a beginner. But yeah, on websites, you can go to any website. Like if I went to my ESPN and I wanted to see how they built this, you can inspect any website and see their code, HTML on the left and their CSS on the right, and kind of go off that as well too. But yeah, copying and pasting is a good thing, but also too, typing it out is a great thing. If you learn how to type faster and do that and know the shortcuts, like there are shortcuts as far as like if I'm in a text editor and I want to get a basic structuring of HTML out, if I just hit the exclamation point and hit tab, it auto kind of completes a file structure for me. Now we're not going to be doing that today, but yes, knowing the shortcuts of a text editor and how to get the code up quickly is definitely beneficial. Yeah, of course. But back to kind of what we were going over just a second. We went over nesting parent-to-child relationships. Again, nesting is where you have elements contained inside other elements. And as you do that, it can change the display of those elements. Like here I have an H1 that is not contained inside an article, and that's why it has bigger text. But if I put an H1 inside of an article, it's going to have smaller text because the web browser will see this as, hey, this is more of an important one. This is kind of less important because it's contained inside of another element. So that's why it changed the size of the text for me. Again, too, if a parent element has padding that it passes down to its children or even its grandchildren, it can pass down that padding. So that's why our apple and banana are 40 pixels away from the edge, but burger here is 80 pixels away from the edge because it's getting 40 pixels from the UL and 40 pixels from the OL. So parent elements or grandparent elements, wherever far up they are, they can pass down settings to their children, grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren of elements. Excuse me, tongue twister. But yeah, any questions so far on nesting or the box model before we move on? And again, I'm not really typing anything that you want to be typing out. I just want to make sure you understand these concepts. Makes sense? Awesome. So let's move on. HTML attributes. Attributes let us add additional information. Oh, what time is it? Every hour I like to take a 10-minute break. Okay, cool. We got about 15 more minutes. Attributes let us add additional information about the element. An attribute is made up of a name and a value. These are separated by an equal sign. The name is pretty much always lowercase, and the value is set in double quotes. Most values are predetermined, so most attributes are going to be predefined. You can only use certain attributes with certain tags. And again, if you want to know how to find all these tags, if I just Google search HTML tags, W3 Schools is my personal favorite place for free online tutorials. They have great documentation. Here are all the tags. Like for instance, if I wanted to know more about an input tag, I can select the input tag, and as I scroll down, it'll show me all the, what web browsers all use input tags. All web browsers should. Input tag was very early on. And here's all the attributes I can use for an input tag, and these are predefined. Not all of these will work on other tags. This only really works on input tags. You can see type has a lot of different ones, values you can use and whatnot. So with every tag you can see which type of attributes. You just have to know, don't memorize all the attributes for tags, because again, memorizing all the tags, memorizing all the attributes and all the values that come with it, that's just going to take a lifetime. Rather, understand where the documentation lives, how you can find the documentation, and easily kind of see which attributes and values you can use for that specific tag. So attributes they go inside the opening tag. They have a name, they're separated by an equal sign, and then they're given a value. And most attributes besides an ID, a class, you can make up your own values for those, are going to have set values. Or a placeholder, you can make up anything with a placeholder. So a good way of kind of explaining attributes is to use input tags, because there's a lot of different attributes and different values that you can use for that. So inside my code, I'm going to get rid of everything that's inside my div tag here, so I don't need that anymore. And the reason why developers, if you're looking at other websites or applications and you see div tags everywhere, is because div tags are blank canvases. They're not going to pass down padding, margin. They're not going to pass down certain settings to its children that live inside of it. So that's why you see div tags everywhere. But inside this div tag, I'm going to type input, I-N-P-U-T. If you know the name of the tag again, you just type the name of the tag and hit tab to autocomplete that for you. It's by default giving me an attribute type with text. Okay, I'm going to see, here's the type attribute, and here's all the different type values I can use. By default, it's going to come with this text value. I'm going to use this placeholder attribute. And what a placeholder does, it specifies a short hint that describes the expected value of that input element. So to use a placeholder attribute, it goes inside my opening tag. If I hit space, I type placeholder equals and give it a value. I can type whatever I want here. I can say, first name. You'll see inside here it says first name inside my input box, because that's the placeholder. It lets the user know, it gives them some information like, hey, I should type my first name in here. Again, if you're not seeing this show up on your web browser, mine is set on autosave for some reason. I don't like really autosave, but my settings are. If you see this save button here has yellow at the top, that means it's not saved. And also, it's not saved to my account because I've never hit save before. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. That'll actually change up some stuff. When I hit save, it saves this pen to my account and gives me more added features here at the bottom, which we'll use these here in a little bit. So underneath that input tag, I'm going to do another input, INPUT. Text, I'm going to say it's going to be an email instead of a text type, which I know that is a value I can use because I've used it before. Here it is, email, under type attribute. It gives a value of email. For the placeholder, I'm going to set that equal to, hey, type your email, please. I'll just say type your email. So that way the user knows, like, hey, in this box I should type an email. Underneath that, I'm going to do another input. This one will be type of password, placeholder, and I'll mistype stuff and have typos. If you see anything, please let me know. That's the biggest part as a beginner going into coding is. You're going to have so many errors just because you've typed things incorrectly. But then in this placeholder, because this is a password, I'm going to put password. I'm also going to give it an attribute of required, and I'm going to set that equal to true. Now I know required is an attribute I can use for input. and it specifies that the input field must be filled out before this form is submitted. Okay, I kind of messed up there. I should have this all wrapped in a form. So real quick, at below my opening div tag here, I'm going to wrap all this inside a form, so that way it works correctly. So I know there's a form tag. I'm going to type form, F-O-R-M, hit tab, and it'll autocomplete a form tag for me. I'm going to take this closing tag. I'm going to Control X or Command X if you're on a Mac to cut it, and I'm going to paste it right before my closing div tag. Now, if you're having struggle following along, I'm not really going to be using this that much. I'm just showing you as an example. Why not have the type text instead of email or password? Because that's what I want the user to type in here. It's an email. Instead of having the type text, by changing this to email, it lets the web browser know, like, hey, this input box should be an email, which I'll show you here why. And it's letting the web browser know, like, hey, this third input box should be a password, which I'll show you here why I did that. Now, I'm going to save this. And now it's not formatted correctly. It doesn't look nice. It should be nested correctly by looking like, technically, like this. But I'm going to show you how you can easily format things. Inside CodePen, next to save, I haven't saved it, that's why there's yellow there. If I hit this little arrow down thing, that's not it. Is it setting? Where's my format button? Huh. Oh, format code on. Weird. That's different now. I think CodePen updated this because it should just have a format button. So format code on save. I'm going to turn that to on. So whenever I save, now it's going to auto format my code for me so it looks nice. And I think there's a shortcut to automatically do that, which you can just Google the command for that. Just Google auto format. So now I have a form tag here. This action attribute will usually point to where your server is located. There's an arrow down from the HTML that I'll offer. Yep. Which is weird. Usually it just says format. You click that and it'll automatically format for you. I've never seen this format code on save before, so CodePen must have just updated their features or whatnot. If yours looks a little different, you just have a format button you can select. This form or this action attribute will usually point to where your server is located, which would be like a PHP server somewhere. I don't have a server. We're not going to talk about that stuff. But typically the action value will point to where your server is located, so that way your information will be saved in your server, your database, or whatnot. I'm going to do a input, or maybe I think a button will work just fine. No, actually I'm going to do input. I'm going to give it a type of, I think it's a button. I don't know for sure, but yes, there is a type button I can use, and a button will submit the form for me when that person clicks that button. I think placeholder will let us say, like, hey, click me. I'll go ahead and save that. No, it's not placeholder. What would it be called? Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it a different way because I know. Get rid of that. I know a button will work just fine. Click. So now I have this button that is contained or nested inside my form element here. So when I click this, it's going to want to submit this form. Now, because I put a required true on my password element or tag here, it's not going to submit this form unless there's a password located. Now, when I type in here, and I'm actually going to do that for email as well too to show you, required equal to true. Okay. So now when I try to submit this form, it's like, hey, this has to be filled out for this form to submit it. So I'm going to type my name. I'm going to type a fake email. And when I type into my password input, because I changed this type to password, the web browser knows like, hey, this is sensitive information. So when I click here, it's not showing that information. This is like a lot of JavaScript and a lot of functionality that I didn't need to code out. I just changed the type to password. The web browser knows this is a sensitive information, so it's going to hide that from the user. Now when I go to try to submit this, it's still going to give me an error because this input is an email. The web browser knows that there should be an @ sign here for an email. So I'll put an @ sign to try to, maybe I can try to trick it. Nope, it's like, hey, it needs text after the @ sign, so I put in there. Make sure I save because this is gonna break because I don't have a server. So yeah, so now I try to submit that because I don't have a server. That's why it says not found. I go ahead and save that or just refresh. Now it comes back. So that's why when I change the type to email, the web browser knows that there has to be an email in here. For password, it knows this is sensitive information, so it hides that. Oops, what did I just do? It hides that information from any. Oops. Pass. Oh, save. Yeah, if things aren't working and you didn't save it, that's what. What did I do? Anyway, I messed up something. Value type equal to password. Might have some text in there, that's weird. There we go. That fixed it. So yeah, so knowing the right attributes and right values to use will better just display your information and better for the user to use. Professor, how is the length number of max characters decided? How is the length number of max characters decided for the input? You can actually width will give you a width of the box. There is a character, min length, so it specifies the number of characters required for that input. You can use a min length attribute to specify how long or how short that input should be. A max length would do your max. I think there's. So yeah, you can specify with more attributes, you know, how long those inputs should be. So yeah, that is possible, bro key. Thank you. Yeah, you're direct messaging me, so no one else can see your questions, but that's fine. There's an arrow down from there. Yep. And Greg, do you have a question? Yeah, it's CodePen.io. Yeah, let me copy that, paste that in the Zoom chat for you. Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, my other favorite one is CodeSandbox.io, and it actually acts as more of a text editor. It'll set up your JavaScript, Angular, depending on what language you're using. So that's a good one to use. Yeah, that's a good one as well too. It's for beginners. CodePen is better because I just direct messaged that to Ben. Sorry, bro, I'm direct messaging you. I need to send that to everybody. There's CodeSandbox.io. CodePen is the one we're using because it sets up your file structure for you, so you don't have to use your link tags to link to your CSS and use your script tag or whatnot to link to your JavaScript. But yeah, CodePen is what we're using right now. Great questions. Yep. Yeah, I do it once a month, so it's free always, and I go over the same concepts pretty much. So if you want to come out again, just look for our Eventbrite or follow us. or Instagram. Follow DevPoint Labs Instagram. We post everything there as well too. But yeah. Yeah, it's alright. Social media is overrated anyway. Have a good one, Greg. Yep, no problem. Bye. Awesome, awesome. Any other questions on attributes? Again, tags are going to have specific attributes and values you can use, and there are certain ones you can make up yourself, which we'll go over here in just a minute. But any other questions on attributes? It's clear. Perfect. Like it. And if you do have questions, unmute yourself. Shut me up. Interrupt me. I don't get offended. We are at our first break mark. So I'm going to take a... Before we move on to CSS, we kind of need to build out a sample navigation bar, a sample just main area of a web page, just so we can use a lot more CSS and style things out a little bit better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this input div container area and just build this out. If you can follow along, do it. If not, that's okay, because I'm going to go a little bit fast so I can have more time with CSS, explaining things, get into Flexbox a little bit more quicker, and then hopefully at the end have more time and I can show you how you can take all this code and put it into an actual text editor of your choice. So after I type all this out and kind of build out this sample or whatever, I'll post it into the Discord chat, so that way you have the same code as I have. That's great, Danny. So yeah, every web page needs I always kind of build out a navigation bar and a main section and put in and bring in some images or whatnot. So I'm going to build out a sample. Where is my mouse? There you are. Sample nav bar here. I'm going to just type NAV because I know there's a nav tag. Again, if you're like, how do you know what tags to use? Google, search HTML tags. There is a nav tag. I know the alphabet. There's nav. And yeah, we're actually going to be doing this exact kind of thing here, right? But yeah, so I'm going to type nav for a nav tag. It's going to be the container for my nav bar. Inside my nav container here, elements, I'm going to have a few anchor tags, which I just type A, hit autocomplete. It'll by default have this href attribute, which will point to where you want to go when you click on this anchor tag. Inside this opening and closing, I'm going to type out home. So I have a home button. I'm going to do another anchor, oops, not capital A, lowercase a, another anchor tag, and I'll give it examples. And I'm going to have this, I'll show you that here in a minute actually, sorry. I'm going to have another anchor tag. This one's going to contain a logo, which I usually always do. So I'm going to have an image tag that's contained or nested inside of this anchor tag. So if I type img for image, it's a self-closing tag, so I don't need a closing tag for that. It'll have a source where the image is located, and then an alt text that'll show up if you don't have an image or the image disappears or it can't find it. So inside of alt attribute, I'm going to type the word logo, because that's what I want to have, is a logo in here. So that way it'll display this because I don't have it pointing to where an image is. Save that. Underneath that, I'll have another anchor tag. This one will be, I don't know, everyone has an About Me section. Then let's do one more to even it out. Oops. I want to do capital A, lowercase a, tab to autocomplete that. And this one will be contact. I have a contact section. Now, let's start off with this home area here. So inside the href, I can have it point to like a specific location on the web. Like if I wanted my home button to go to, let's say, I don't know, anything. Let's go back to NASA because I like space stuff. If I copy this URL, paste that inside my CodePen. Now, when I click on this home button, it's going to take me to this website, and it's going to take me away from CodePen. Now, I forgot what attribute I need to use, so that way it won't go to that website. It'll open up a new tab. So if I go under an anchor tag, an A tag, I click on that because I can't remember the documentation off the top of my head. I know there's an attribute. Target. Here it is. This target attribute specifies where to open the link in the document. I want this underscore blank as the value. So that way when I click on this home button, it'll open up a new tab, keep my CodePen here, and take me to that location. So if I have the target attribute, set that equal to, it said underscore blank is the one I want to use. And go ahead and save that. Now when I click on this home button, it's going to open up a new tab and take me to nasa.gov. So that's with this target blank. If I didn't have that there, when I click on the home button, it's going to take me from CodePen where I'm located now and take me to NASA, which I don't want that to happen. So that's why I use this target attribute blank and whatnot. My examples here, instead of pointing to a website, I'm going to point to a element that's on my HTML document here. So I'm going to say, and to point to that, I have to use this hashtag and then put the name of the ID attribute where that element is located. We haven't gone over IDs yet, but I'm just going to say, hey, this will go to my examples section. And then inside my opening div here, I'm going to give it an ID, set that equal to that same value that I put right here, which is examples. So now when I click on examples, it's going to take me to this div container, which when I click on it, it's not going to take me because it's already here, which that will make more sense here in a little bit. Now ID attributes can be whatever value you want. An ID doesn't have specific values you have to use. You can make up whatever you want for that value. But IDs you should best practice, IDs should be specific to that element. You can also give it a class attribute and set this equal to whatever you want. But classes are going to be more generic. They're going to be used for multiple containers. Like if I had a second div container, I could give it the same class attribute, same value, and so that way if I have styling, when we get over into styling in CSS, it's going to give those to both classes if I grab it by the class name. So IDs, you want to be specific to the element, and class values, you want to be more generic to apply to multiple, whatever, apply, I don't know, you can give it whatever name you want, it doesn't matter, whatever. Let's see, image. Okay, let's work on this image portion. Let's grab an image from online. Good place to go for free stock images is called pexels.com. And they have free images you can use. Actually, you know what? Because I want a logo, I'm going to Google search DevPoint Labs logo, because I know they have it online. Okay, so I search DevPoint Labs logo, I go to images, if I click on this one. Okay, I know this is a logo because it has the checkered background. If I click on something and it doesn't have that checkered background, it's going to give me this purple background rather than just that kind of beaker image. So this first one is the one I want to use. If I right click on this, again, you don't really need to follow along as much because I can copy and paste this over into Discord, and you can copy and paste it over to your CodePen. I'd rather you kind of be listening and understanding what I'm doing. If I want to use this logo that lives online, because this is free, I can just use it, I do right click and I do copy image address. You don't want to do copy link address because that line of code is going to be like 3 times longer than what you really need. Copy image address is what you want. So if I copy that image address, go to my CodePen and paste that into my source, Go ahead and save. Now I bring in this logo, which the size of it's big. I'm going to change that later. But that's how you kind of bring in a logo from online if you want to. The about, I'm not going to really point to anywhere for now. So I now have a nav bar. You can see now that my code, my HTML, is kind of getting a little bit lengthier. What I can do is, if I don't want my web browser here taking up a bunch of space, because I have a CodePen account created, because it is saved, you should have this icon or this toolbar down here at the bottom with this one that has a square with an arrow at the right corner. If I click on that, it's going to open the web browser into a new tab, so that way I don't have the web browser taking up so much space. You can actually change the direction of where your web browser is with this little change view. I can change the web browser to be on the side now instead of the bottom or top. But again, I'm going to just open it up in a new tab with this square arrow icon here at the bottom of CodePen. So that way my web browsers open up into a new tab. I'm going to build a main section of my website here using a main tag. I'm going to give it a, I'm just going to give this a hashtag name and give this main tag an ID equal to main, not name, what is it, main? Sorry, main. So that way when I click on this about button anchor tag, it's going to take me to my main section of my website, because this value with the hashtag matches the value of the ID, and that's what the hashtag that matches with IDs of the element. So inside here of my main section of my website, I'm going to have a couple of div containers. So I'll have a div container, which is a blank canvas pretty much. It's going to have, what do I do? H1 image page, so I'm going to do an H1 and say it's a heading of some sort. Underneath that, I'm going to have an image, and then have a p tag for some sort of a description. Instead of doing 3 of those shortcut way, I'm just going to copy, go underneath that, and paste it 3 times. So now I have 3 div containers that are nested inside my main container, and inside those divs I have a heading, an image, and some alt text which I haven't typed out yet. I can create also as well too like a footer, which should be the bottom, but I'm not going to really do that right now. Let's go ahead and grab 3 images from pexels.com. Again, free stock images you can use online is a place called Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S. I'll go ahead and copy and paste that to the Zoom chat so you have that. And also YouTube. Does anyone have a favorite animal, food, anything we want to display for that first image? Tacos. I like it, Danny. Let's do tacos. Oh man, I want some street tacos. I am now. Oh, burrito tacos. Those. That's okay. I want this image. So if I want this image again, I right click on it, copy image address, go back over to my code. Inside the source, I'm going to paste that. Now if Pexels deleted this image and got rid of it, in this alt text I'm going to say, hey, this should be tacos. So that way if that image does disappear and I wanted to know like, hey, what was supposed to go there, that alt text tacos will show up. I'm going to change the heading to say tacos, and description just put yummy. Alright. Second image. Anyone have a second image they want to post? Espresso. Ooh. Espresso. Where's the capitalized? Doesn't matter. Coffee. Ooh. That's Looks nice. Let's use this. That's a fancy machine. Those are expensive. Yeah. Let's just use this nice little coffee image right here. So we'll take this first one. Copy image address. Again, don't copy link address. That's going to have a lot more longer code. Copy image address. Go back to my CodePen. Paste that in there. The heading's going to be copy. Description is going to be for energy. And then the alt text, because it's a coffee image, I'm going to put coffee. And then the last image, does anyone have anything? An animal, food, location, anything they want to display? If not, I'm going to pick puppies or something. No one? No one has a third suggestion? Okay, let's do puppies. I mean, how can you have a bad day when you're looking at a puppy? I mean, honestly, French Bulldog, cute. That little husky. Okay, so we use this husky, copy image address, go to my CodePen, and this last image source, I'm going to paste that in there. It's supposed to be a husky, puppy. I'm going to put husky, puppy, and the description is so cute, because they are freaking cute. Save that. Now, I kind of, as you're coding, whenever you do something, you should check to make sure it worked. I kind of did a lot of things at once. I added 3 images, I changed all this stuff without making sure it was working, but it should be. Over here, it's not showing up. It is saved. What I need to do is just refresh this tab, and now I got my tacos, yummy, coffee for energy, and my husky puppy who is so cute. And yeah, that is it. So now what we can see, because there's so much spacing, when I click on examples, it's going to take me down to my examples, which there's nothing underneath it, so it's not bringing it to the top, which when we get into CSS, I'll add some margins so we can have some spacing. So you can see, because when I hit examples, it has this hashtag, which means look for an ID with the value examples and go to that location on that page. So when I hit examples, it's going to look for an ID matching examples here, or whatever name I put. And because this matches the same here as examples, it's going to go to this location on my website. Another cool thing too, man, actually I forgot it. Instead of doing it instantly, there's like a HTML, CSS scroll behavior. Scroll behavior. Smooth. Okay. This is kind of cool inside your CSS, which we'll add it later. I just want to reference it real quick. Instead of when I click on it and it instantly goes to that spot, like it's going to like smoothly scroll down to that section when we get inside CSS. I just need to remember what the value was. Property and value, which is scroll behavior smooth. Cool. So we kind of have a sample web page. It's not really styled correctly, and our images are huge, and I want to change this font color and give it some background and whatnot. So that's where CSS comes into play. So I'm going to go ahead and copy everything I have in my HTML so far. Copy that. Go over to the Discord if anyone wants it. Hello, neighbor. Go ahead, paste that for you. So from the closing div all the way up to the top nav, I would copy that, go over to my CodePen HTML and paste that in there if you want the same code as me. Does anyone have any questions on what I've done so far? Now, if that was like hard to follow along, yes, I went through that quickly just because I want to have more time into CSS and whatnot. And like I said, This workshop is for more understanding the concepts rather than having something fancy to show off. 35, 1235, yeah. All right, so how do we start styling our web page? Well, we have structuring of HTML, and now we need to use CSS to style. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Doesn't matter, that's not really important. CSS adds styling to our elements. These styles act like rules that specify how our element should be displayed. We select an element and declare properties and values for that element should have. So for instance, if I had, this kind of looks weird because I try to put it all on one screen, but inside my HTML in this square in this red square here, I have a H1 tag with a heading. Inside my CSS, I would select that, and you have the selector here. You can either grab it by the tag name. I mean, we'll go over that here in just a minute. You select the element, and then inside the closing curly brackets here, we would give properties and values to apply to that element. So here I gave it a color of red, so that's why the text is red. I gave it a background of blue, that's why the background is blue behind it. So CSS, we have to grab the element. Inside the closing and curly brackets, we give it properties and values. The properties and values are separated by a colon. And then to separate the other properties, you have a semicolon after the value. And then you can declare another property and another value. So that's basic CSS right there. CSS Selectors. What is the link to the Discord? Oh, the link to the Discord. Let me get you that again. Invite people, copy, paste that over for you. So yeah, click on that link and then you can join our Discord. And again, don't copy these images. Copy from the nav all the way down to the div. If you copy those images, that might screw it up. Actually, it will, most likely. I don't know, trial and error, you gotta figure it out. Alright, CSS Selectors. Questions? Perfect. A selector is a way to identify an element or elements on the page that so that we can target them and apply rules. The most common way to select an element is by the tag name, ID attribute, or class attribute. Remember what I said earlier, ID attributes, you want to, the value, you can say whatever value you want. You can give it multiple values if you want to, but an ID value should be specific to that element, whereas a class should have a value that you can apply to multiple elements. But for instance, this first red box here, this is saying, hey, grab all H1 tags, comma, grab all H2 tags, comma, and grab all H3 tags, and give the text color red. This one, in the second example, says, hey, grab all P tags that live inside H1 tags. You kind of want to read it right to left without the comma. With the comma, it's saying, hey, H1 tags, H2 tags, H3 tags. This one is being specific, saying, hey, grab all P tags that are nested or live inside my H1 tags and give them a color blue. If you want to grab the element by its class name, you use the dot notation. So you say dot the class name of whatever you gave that element, and then you can apply the colors to that. An ID, if you want to grab it by the ID name, you use the #, hashtag, or octothorpe, if you want to be specific. And you just say the ID name, and then inside your curly brackets, you can add the properties. There's a ton of different ways to grab elements. You can grab it by, let's say, this is an input tag with a type attribute equal to email. I mean, you can do it that way as well, too. But as beginners, we're going to stick with the tag name, if it's nested inside of certain things, and the class and ID name. But yeah, there's a ton of different ways to select. If you want to know all the ways, just Google CSS Selectors, and it'll tell you all the different ways you can grab an element. But as we're going through this, we're going to stick to the very generic ways. CSS Specificity. This is kind of a little complicated, but if two or more rules apply to the same element, and their selectors are identical, the latter of the two will apply, which I'll go over that here in a little bit. So if you have code and you're inside your CSS, and you select an element, and then later on in your code you select the element the same way. Whichever one comes later in your code, that one will apply. If a selector is more specific than the others, the more specific selector will apply. So if I look at this chart here that I just got online, the very least specific way you can grab an element is by the element name. A higher specificity would be by grabbing it by a class name. Higher than that would be grabbing it by its ID name. And higher than that would be styling it inside the HTML file, or inside the tag, opening tag, which typically you don't want to do inline styling. You don't want to do styling inside your tags. But that's the most specific way. There's actually a fifth one. That's if you use the important hashtag or #important, but we're not going to go over that. So by default, these will all be 0. If you grab it by the element name, that would give it a 1. If you grab it by the ID name, that would give it a 1 here, and this would be higher than a 1 lower, which that sounds complicated, but I'll go over that here in just a sec. So if we want to grab our nav bar, and let's say we want to give it a background color, how could we grab this nav container, this nav element inside our CSS? How would we grab that nav container? There's a bunch of different ways. Anybody? Bueller? So if I go back to my document here, different ways of grabbing elements. Use a class maybe. Yeah, we can use a class. Let's do that. Let's give it a class. Now, I'm going to give it, actually, instead of a class, a class does work, because classes you want to be generic that apply to multiple navs, but we only have one nav element really on a web page, so a class would be fine. So let's do class, give it, let's say, nav, yeah, let's just say nav bar. Let's say nav bar. So if I gave it a class value, excuse me, attribute, and a value of navbar, how would I grab it inside my CSS? By a class. How would I grab that then? .navbar, exactly. Because it's a class name, and I give it a class, I have to use the dot notation. So I gave it a class attribute, value of navbar inside my CSS. I have to say dot, the same thing, navbar, give it some opening and curly brackets, and now I can start giving it some styling. Let's do background. What color should we give the navbar background? Anybody? It can have generic names like pink, red, green, or blue, or if I want to be specific on a color, if you Google like color picker, okay, and let's say I want a instead of like a generic blue, I want like a very specific blue, I can use this color picker here. I'll send that out in the chat there. Wow, that's a long. So yeah, I can pick any color I want. Let me do like a blue. I'll do like a dark blue. So this would be the color. I can grab it by this. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. This is a great way, HSL, but it's a little bit more complicated, and I don't have really time to go over that. I'm going to grab it by its red, green, blue, RGB. So if I go ahead and copy that, and go back to my code CSS and give an RGB opening and closing and paste that in there. There we go. Go ahead and save that. I should have a background of blue. Now, what kind of sucks is if I go ahead and inspect here, I can see these anchor tags if I hover over it, I use my CSS selector here, and I hover over it, I see that this is an anchor tag and it has a purple color. They're also underlined. If I select that, here's some CSS styling that comes by default with anchor tags. It gives it a cursor of a pointer. So you can see my mouse, when I'm not hovered over an anchor tag, it's an arrow. When I hover over the anchor tag, it changed to a pointer. That's by default. It has that styling already. It also has this text decoration of underline, which I don't want. I'm going to get rid of. So inside my CSS, I would have to declare text decoration and set it to none. And also the color is purple. I don't want the color to be purple because purple on top of blue, I can't see it. That doesn't look good. And here's all the padding and margin and stuff. So inside, how can I grab all of my anchor tags that live inside my navbar? And one side note, sorry, I should have gone over this, I always forget to, is you can type notes inside your CSS and HTML. Like if you're working on a project with multiple people, you want to kind of, break out your styling and say, hey, this is my nav bar styling. My quick way of, because I always forget, is I just highlight it, hit Control ? Or /, or if you're on a Mac, it's Command ? And what this does is it gives me, inside CSS, if I have a /* and a */, everything inside of here, the web browser is not going to read. So I can have text in here that the web browser is not going to read, but it's good for me to kind of have notes in here if I want to. Inside my HTML, if I want to type a lot of notes or explain why I did something. Again, if I highlight all of that, Control for Windows is Control ? Mac it's Command ? You can see that HTML is a little bit different. You use a less than pound dash dash and then a dash dash greater than to close it out, and everything that goes in between there can now be, it's not going to be read by the web browser, it's just going to be notes that I can have typed in here. So this is my nav bar. If I want to grab all my anchor tags, how would I grab all those anchor tags? What's a way that I can grab all the anchor tags? If I go back to my little documentation here, what's one way of grabbing all the anchor tags without giving it an ID or a class? Let's say that. Use a list. No, not necessarily a list. What do you mean by use a list? So I already have these anchor tags. Where are they nested? Where do these? Where are the? What's the direct parent to these anchor tags? An array? Nope, you're going into more programming stuff. An array isn't with nav A. Good, Danny. Nav A. So again, over here, when I was explaining this, this first red box here says, hey, grab all H1 tags, grab all H2 tags, and grab all H3 tags. The second example without the commas says, hey, grab all P tags that live inside of my H1 element. So Danny said nav A. So if I do nav, lowercase, nav A, that is saying grab all anchor tags that live inside my navbar and apply these styles to it. So that's great. I can go in and give each one a class with the same value and give them all separate IDs with values if I want to grab a specific anchor tag, but just for this example and kind of coding time-wise, I'm not going to give these IDs and classes. I'm just going to say, hey, because I only have one navbar element on my web page really, or my HTML document, I can say this. Because I'm not going to have a navbar later on at the bottom of my, I mean you can, but typically people don't. But this wouldn't be good if I didn't want to style these anchor tags, because now it's going to grab all these anchor tags too that are at the bottom. But typically you only have one nav tag element inside of an HTML document, so this would be fine. So yeah, Danny, you are correct. This is saying grab all anchor tags that live inside my nav bar. So if I had anchor tags inside my main or div area, it's not going to grab those because it's not inside my nav element. And earlier, what I saw is when I inspect my anchor tag, again, I go on my web page here, I go to right-click Inspect. I use the Select Elements. I'm under Elements on the device here, and I grab the Select Element. I can grab each anchor tag, and I can see the CSS properties it has and values and whatnot. I can see it has this text decoration underline. I want to get rid of that. So inside my CSS, I say text decoration, if I spell it right. I'm going to give that none to get rid of the underline. And what color should I give my text? If it's a blue background, we probably want like, I don't know, white, gray, black. I don't know, let's just do white. Color, let's say, does white work? Find out. So now if I go ahead, close out of my developer tools, refresh. Okay, cool. Now the color's white and it got rid of those purple underlines. Awesome. What I don't like as well too is it's not up against the edge of my web browser here. It's inheriting. Let's see if I can show you. It's kind of hard to do inside CodePen, but if I was using a text editor, basically it's inheriting the spacing from the body. The body is passing down. I can't tell if it's margin or padding because I can't select the body inside of here. So a quick way to fix that, if you don't want to worry about elements passing down padding and margin to elements that are nested inside of it, what I can do is typically you do it at the top of your CSS. It doesn't really matter where, but you want to use the star function, which is Shift 8. And what that star icon does is it's saying, hey, grab every element I have and apply these settings to the element. And I'm going to say, hey, set the padding to all my elements equal to 0 pixels, and set my margin equal to 0 as well. So that way, if a parent or a parent element passes down padding and margin, it's not going to pass that down. I'm going to have to go in there and give it my own padding and margin, which is nice. That's, as a developer, I want to space things out properly. And when I use Flexbox later on, this is a great thing to do because padding and margin will mess up your spacing with Flexbox. So inside your CSS, you would use a star selector to grab everything, and then apply, say, hey, give everything a margin and a padding of 0, and then if I want to give it padding and margin, I can just go in and specifically get it that. So if I go ahead and save, and you'll see everything will kind of smash together because I zeroed out all the padding and margin, but later on in Flexbox it's going to be a lot easier for me to space things out. So cool, that got rid of that white edge border because it's not inheriting the padding from the body element anymore. I zeroed everything out, so now everything's nice and smashed together. So when I select examples, it goes down to the bottom. Again, when the scroll behavior, smooth. Where would I think I just, let's see, scroll, let's see if this will work. I'm not exactly sure where I would have to put that. If I put that in the body, behavior smooth. Probably spelled that wrong. Scroll behavior smooth. Yep, that's spelled right. Or that might not work because I think it has to go inside my HTML tag. Let's see though. Refresh. Oh, see, now it's smooth. Cool. So now it like scrolls down to that section rather than automatically going to that section. So that's that scroll behavior, which I just kind of was messing around with last night. Yeah, that's a cool little CSS feature you can add. So it's not like just instantly going to that spot. It's scrolling to take me there. That's kind of a cool feature. So yeah, let's change the size of our logo. change the size of our images here because they're so big. And I want them to kind of be a little bit smaller. So how would I grab, let's say, I'm going to type in here styling for my logo. Then I always forget which, / and then I highlight it, and then I use Control question mark, and it'll take out that text for me, so the web browser won't read it with this / star to close it out, *. How would I grab the image, this logo here, to change this height and width? I mean, a couple of different ways. Anyone want to give an example or specify how I should grab it? Let's give it an ID of logo. So we'll give it an ID, set that equal to logo. And how do I grab an ID? What's the specific thing with class? I use dot notation. With IDs, I have to grab it with the octothorpe or pound sign, whichever way you want to describe it. We got about 4 more minutes to our next break. So to grab that with an ID of logo, I do # logo because that's the value I gave it. And now I can apply styling to my logo, which I want to make it, if I want to figure out how big it is right now, I go to Inspect, do my little Inspect element icon here, hover over my image, select it, or actually just hover over it, and it tells me it is 192 pixels by 192 pixels, and it's an image tag in that purple. So it's 192, I don't know, let's make it 50. So I want to give it a height of 50 pixels, and it should automatically give it a width of 50 pixels, but just to make sure, I'm going to give it like a nice square 50 pixels. And if you're like, how do you know what properties to use? Again, you can Google search CSS properties. W3 Schools is the best. And here are all the CSS properties I can use to style out elements, which there's a ton. Again, you don't need to memorize all of them. You just need to know how to reference them. I'll post that in the Discord chat, or the Zoom chat there. So that way you can now look at all the different CSS properties you can use to style out your elements. There is a height and width. Yep, there is a height. Select the height of the element. So now I change that. It's saved. I have no yellow at the top of my CodePen. If I go over here, I refresh. Boom. Now my logo's a bit smaller. That looks great. Let's change each image here. So how would I grab each image without giving it an ID or a class, and not, if I just, if I say, hey, grab the image by the image tag, whoops, that's going to grab every image. It's going to grab this image and all these images. But I want to be specific, and I just want to grab the images that are inside this main container. How would I be able to do that without giving it a ID or a class? Anybody? Somebody? Can anybody hear me? No one? Danny kind of said it earlier. That's how we grabbed our anchor tags. How would we grab our image tags now? So I want to grab each image. Come on, someone's got to have it. So I'm going to use the inception style, where it lives inside of another thing. I'm going to say, hey, inside my main tag, grab all my images that live inside my main element. So now I can give those a height, I don't know, 150, and a width of 150. And what this is saying, again, without a comma, if I had a comma there, then that's saying, hey, grab my image, my main elements and all my image elements. But without the comma, it's saying, hey, inside my main element, grab all the images that live inside there. Now technically, it's inside the div. I don't need to put the div in there, but it's inside the main, so that's fine. So now, if I go ahead and save that, go over here to refresh, all my images are about 150 by 150. Maybe I'll make them bigger. Let's do like 300. 300. Boom. Refresh. Now they're a little bit bigger. That's nice. I still have that scrollability where it scrolls down to my div container down here. Let's see. What's next? Let's go over specificity, and I'll show you how that works. So, if I grab, let's say, anchor tags as an example, color, let's give it a background. I don't know why you would do this, but whatever. Let's give it a background of red just to see what that looks like. Nope, didn't work. Oh, I spelled background wrong. So I just have a background of red. Now, what I did is I also gave this logo the background of red, which I don't like because that logo shouldn't have a background of red. So this is grabbing it by the tag name, which CSS Specificity, that's kind of the lowest way to grab it. If I come up above, below, it doesn't matter. If I'm grabbing it by the hashtag logo, which is the ID name is more specific, that should override the background color. So if I do inside my logo, I do background, and set that equal to my, where's my navbar background? So that way it's the same. That should, I don't know, we'll find out. That should make it so my logo background now should be the same color of my navbar, which it did, but it still has a red underline, which is annoying. It's kind of a weird workaround. Oh, what if I said none? I don't think that works. That won't work. Yeah, it's still there. Huh, where's that little red coming from? Whoops. Copy. This is a bad example. Okay, now as a developer, I'm like, where is that red coming from? Select my element here. That's okay. That's coming from my anchor tag background. Okay, so that's not the background of my logo. My logo's here because my logo is nested inside my anchor tag. My anchor tag still has that background of red. So what I would want to do is maybe give this an ID of, I don't know, logo, or give it an ID of, I don't know, what's a good name? I'm just going to give it an ID of change. So now I can just grab this specific anchor tag and get rid of that. That doesn't matter anymore. It's the anchor tag background I need to change. So if I grab that specific anchor tag, I'll grab it by its ID name of change is what I gave it, and give it a background of the same color of my navbar background. So hopefully, I'm not 100% sure, this is how you find out as a developer, trial and error, is boom. Now that anchor, what is going on? Now that anchor tag background is set to the same background as my navbar, so that red disappears. When I did it before, I was just setting the background of my logo to the same color, which still had a little bit of the anchor tag there. So as I went in, selected my element, figured out that that background was coming from my anchor tag, but now it's the same. See, that logo doesn't have a background color, so it doesn't have anything, so it's just being displayed whatever's behind it. But that's why that little red was at the bottom. Because I'm being more specific on how I grab it by the ID name rather than by the element name, that's overriding the background I gave to all the other anchor tags because I grabbed it more specifically. Now if I grab it the same way, I do hashtag change, and I grab it the same way, background, let's say white. If you grab it the same way, because this comes later on in the code, the web browser is going to give it this white background, hopefully. Yeah, so that anchor tag now has the white background because I grabbed it the same way. Now if I want to be really more specific than grabbing it by an ID, how would I do more specific? I would say anchor tag with the name of change. Maybe that will work. Oh, cool, that did work. So let me try to explain what I just did there. Here, I'm saying, hey, all my anchor tags that have an ID of change, give this background color. And this one just says, hey, grab the ID with this back and change the background color to white. Because I'm being more specific, I'm giving it more, let's see if I can explain this. This would be, and this is kind of getting way too deep, element ID 0100. So I'm grabbing it by the ID, so it would have a property at specificity of 0, 1, 0, 0. Okay, it's going to kind of break up my code. But that's what it means for specificity here in this. I'm grabbing it by the ID, so that's a 0, 1, 0, 0. Because here I'm grabbing it more specifically, or it has a higher specificity, I'm saying, hey, here's the tag name and here's the ID attribute. So this one would be a technically a 0, 1, 1, 0. So because it has a 1 here and a 0 here, this is a higher specificity, so this one's going to override this. Doesn't matter what I put here because this specificity is higher. That's why the background is changing back to blue instead of having white, because I'm being more specific on how I grab that. Now that's kind of a little bit of a deeper way of looking at specificity, but that's exactly how it's working. Any questions there? That's kind of, I went a little bit too deep into specificity, but that's how specificity works. It's kind of Google's or YouTube specificity, and there's great simple videos that'll show you exactly how that works. But specificity, if you grab it the same way, whichever one comes later in your CSS will apply. If you grab it more specific, it doesn't matter where it is in your CSS, that one's going to apply. Confidential, yes. Thanks, team. Return to military. Oh, Thank you for attending. Yes, if you're leaving, yeah, thank you for coming. I do this once a month again. Have a good day. But yeah, any questions on CSS specificity or how you grab elements and apply properties and values to that? It's kind of a little bit of a deeper knowledge I didn't really want to go into, but it worked. CSS information, thanks. No problem. Anyone have any questions about that? Your CSS specificity? Cool. Let's take our last break. We'll take a quick break here because I need to do one more thing. We're going to go over Pseudo-Classes and then jump into Flexbox, which Flexbox is awesome. And then after Flexbox, I'm going to show you how to grab your CodePen and paste it into an actual code editor if you want to learn that. So yeah, let's go ahead and take, welcome back. No questions. Awesome. All right. So this last little 40 minutes here, I want to get through Flexbox, so that's awesome. And then I'll give you some other additional information if you want to look up media queries. That's great to know, so that way you can style your website depending on the viewport, the device that's looking at your web page. Like if it's a small cell phone, you definitely don't want this image to be 300 pixels wide because that's just going to take up the full screen of that small cell phone. And you use media queries to kind of go in there and say like, hey, if someone's on a small cell phone, take out these images or make them really small, or just have the description of the image instead of something like that, which is media queries. But yeah, we've covered a lot so far. We've gone over HTML, tags, attributes, nesting, the box model, padding and spacing inside your content, margin spacing outside. You also have a border, different types of attributes and values, why they're important, CSS, how to select something and style it, specificity, which kind of went a little deeper than I wanted to, but hopefully you grasp that. Now CSS Pseudo-Class. Pseudo-classes are used to define a specific state of an element. For example, when the cursor is hovered over an element, we can use pseudo-classes to target that element and change styling as the mouse hovers over that element. You would create a new CSS selector of that element and add a hash or colon hover to select and create new properties and values. So if I were just to Google search CSS Pseudo-Class, W3 Schools is my favorite. If I scroll down, there's a lot of different pseudo selectors you can use. Yeah, there's a lot. So if you like already clicked on something you visited, if someone's already clicked on it, you could use this pounds visited to change the colors to make sure that user knows like, hey, I already clicked on that. We're going to use hover just to kind of get this pseudo classes down. So we would use the colon hover, and then when the mouse is hovered over that element, those properties are going to be applied. So that works really well with a nav bar. So underneath my nav bar anchor tags here, I'm going to grab it the same way. I'm going to say nav A and then give it the colon hover. So when my mouse is hovered over any anchor tag, these properties are going to be applied. So if I go over here, the background red is annoying, but we're just going to keep it anyway. If I inspect and I look over an anchor tag, the font size is 16 pixels. So maybe we'll make those a little bit bigger and change the color to off-white, which again I can go to color picker, maybe give it an off-white gray color. There we go. And give it this RGB. So now when it's hovered over it, I'm going to say, hey, change the color to this RGB I just selected, which is a darker gray. Paste that in there. Change the font size to, instead of 16, was it 16? Yeah, it was 16 pixels. I mean, you could be obnoxious and change it to 50 pixels. That's going to really look weird, but I'll just show you. So now what I do, whatever element I want to give this hover pseudo class to, I just use this colon hover, and now these properties will apply when my mouse is hovered over that. So I go back to my code, make sure it's saved, go to my other tab here, refresh. So now when I hover over this, it changes to, what did I say, 50 pixels, and is the color, it's not changing. What did I do wrong? Color RBG. RGB, that's why. Again, when things aren't working, it's not the computer, it's typically my fault. I've had a typo or something. So I put RBG instead of RGB, red, green, blue. So I'll go ahead and save that. Refresh. Now you can see the text color is a little bit different. Now I don't like how it abruptly changes instantly. There is, and I think it's transition. So you can add a transition property to the original. So if I add transition, it'll give this transition effect and say, let's take 0.5 seconds for it to happen. So what it's saying is, hey, when you're changing the properties to your pseudo, let 5 seconds for those changes to happen, or take over 0.5 seconds for those changes, rather than for it to change instantly. So again, I refresh. Now you can see it takes 0.5 seconds for that to go. Now I don't really want it to be 50 pixels. That's pretty obnoxious. If it was 16, maybe I'll just do 18 pixels. And I can even say, hey, take 5 seconds. It's kind of obnoxious as well too, but just to show you, when I'm hovered over that, you can see it's now taking 5 seconds for that to transition. I'm going to go back to 0.5 for that, and maybe instead of a background of red, I'm going to give it a background of orange, ORANGE. Refresh after I save. Okay, orange and red, that's a very similar. Let me do green. Oh, I didn't spell it right, that's why. Background, ORAN. Watch your spelling. Refresh. Now, that's orange. That looks weird. But you can see I'm not going for awesome, cool looking design. I'm just showing you how things can work. So I'm going to not have an orange background. Or what you could do is give it like a light red. So it's just barely, but I'm not being specific on that red color. I'm just saying generic red. So that's pseudo-classes. What you do is you select it the same way, and then you just add a colon hover, or whatever pseudo-class you want to use, and then those properties will apply as that is used. Refresh. Boom. So now at least I know, it's a little bit easier for the user to know that which one they're about to select. Let me do one other thing. Main image here. There's a cool property called box shadow, and it's a little bit kind of deeper, but for images it's kind of cool to give a 3D effect. So if I do like if I give over my main images here a box shadow property, shadow. The first property, if it's positive, it's going to go out to the right and bottom. If it's negative, the shadow's going out to the left and top. But I want it to go out the bottom to the right and bottom, which I'll show you here. 10 pixels by 10 pixels. How much shadow comes out, and then the color of it, I want it to be black. A black shadow. Let's see if that worked. I could have spelled something wrong, which I did. Box 2 D's. Come on, people, you gotta be watching my spelling here. I gotta watch it myself. So now I have this little shadow. Because it's a positive number, it comes out to the left 5 pixels and to the bottom 5 pixels. And it's 10 pixels wide, black. Kind of covers my yummy here. What's cool about that, maybe I won't do 10 pixels so much. I'll do 2 pixels. So it doesn't come out as far to the bottom. Oh, sorry. So the first property, if it's positive, it's out to the right. The second property is out, if it's positive, it comes out the bottom. So if I change this to a -5 and a -5, instead of it being out the right and bottom, now my shadow is at the top and left, which we can't see the left. So negative is top, the first one. This one is out the right or left. If it's negative, it's left. If it's positive, it's right. If this one's negative, it's to the top. If it's positive, it's to the bottom. And this states the color. There's also a third property you can do. I'm not going to go over that, which makes it thicker. Refresh, it looks nice. There we go. Now, if I do a hover effect over this, if I do a main image, and I do a hover, and I change the shadow box. I'm going to give a transition on this because it's going to happen so fast. Transition. So I have to there's an R. Transition. I have to spell it correctly so I sound it out weird. Take it 0.5 seconds for it to happen. And now I change the box shadow to be a little bit bigger. So let's do 8 pixel by 8 pixel. Save that, it's still black. Refresh. So now you can see that that grew by 3 pixels. So it kind of gives that little hover, like a 3D effect. Like if I hover over an image, kind of gives that pop. Which really I should probably do like 2, maybe 8 because, or 5 because it's coming out too far on my text. And this is honestly 90% of your CSS, or 90% of your coding for HTML and CSS is going to be inside your CSS, making everything look properly the way you want and looking nice. So yeah, so now this little hover cool effect gives it like a 3D shadow if I hover over that image that my user can see. Cool. So that's pseudo-classes. Any questions on pseudo-classes? Silence is great. Let's get into Flexbox. And then, oh, we have plenty of time for Flexbox. Awesome. So Flexbox. Flexbox is awesome because before Flexbox, you would have to Flexbox positions things the way you want to and lays them out really well, and it makes it responsive as well too. It helps with that responsive design. Flexbox is built around the idea that you have a flex container which you apply to the parent, and then its direct children you can now move around as items. If it's not a direct child, you won't be able to move that around, but if it's contained inside that child, it still moves around. But anyway, these flex items can easily be moved around as we define properties in the container as well as the items themselves. So again, the container is the parent. We want to apply the properties to the parent, and then the items are its direct children. When we went back to nesting, for instance, this nav element here, its direct children is each of these anchor tags. this image is not its direct child because it's contained inside this anchor tag. So this image, its parent would be this anchor tag. This anchor tag's child would be this image because it's nested one container in. So again, the container is the parent and the items are its direct children. Using display as the property in our CSS and giving it the value of flex to the parent, any element with this property and value will enable Flexbox on its container. So we have to use this display value of flex in order to enable Flexbox to work. And we give it to the parent. Now the parent has specific properties we can apply to it. We can change the direction to be lining up in, by default, which I have a slide here for it. Sorry, something was going off. By default, the items will line up in a row, left to right. We can change it so it's in a column, so they line up horizontally up and down. But these are most of the properties you apply to the parents. These are some of the properties you can apply to the children. You can change the order of your items as children. So if you want, instead of going into your HTML and changing the order, you can just give it a higher order number and it'll change how they are laid out. There's a Flexbox cheat sheet. This person has made an awesome Flexbox cheat sheet. The left side is all the properties you can apply to the parent. The right side is all the properties you can apply to the children. I'll give you this because it's a lot better documentation to go over. Give out that. I'll also put it in YouTube. So flex direction, by default, they're all going to line up on the x-axis or horizontally from left to right. You can change that if you want to stack the items on top of each other. So by default, we're going to change the display type to be inline instead of block elements. This will establish our main axis and thereby defining the direction of the flex items are placed in the direction of the flex container, either in a row, so left to right, or in a column stacked on top of each other. We'll go over that here in just a minute. Flex wrap is a property you apply to the parent, so when the items, before they smash together, instead of them smashing and overlapping, they'll just apply that element onto a new line and give spacing out the way we need to. So if I want to, let me do as an example, I'll do the nav bar, and then I will show you or ask you how you would do it to the images in our main section here. So inside my nav bar, what is, I kind of said it earlier, but what is the parent to every anchor tag? What is its parent? Yep, nav, exactly. So the nav has to have that display flex property attached to it. So inside my nav bar here, I would say display, if I can type, flex, save that, and now let's see what happens. Cool. By default, they stack up to the top and to the left. That's by default. They're going to line up in a row and be at the top. Now I can change those so that way the items aren't stacked to the top by align items. So let's align the items so they're in the center. So if I use the property align items to the parent and I use the value of center, it will align all the items in the center. So if I do align item center, now they're not going to be at the top left or just the top, they're going to be more centered. That didn't work. Align items, sorry, it's misspelled, it can't be item, it's items. Refresh, now they're in the center. Okay, now they're all smashed together, so there is a property I can use in Flexbox that will justify the content. Let's do space between, let's try that out. So inside my parent, if I do a justify content, I can't type, and space, I think it said between. See what that does. Save it, go over here, refresh. Now I have even spacing in between all the items. So regardless of the size of the viewport of whatever device is looking at my website, it's going to give even spacing in between the items. Now I don't like, for my navbar, I don't like space between because I like spacing on the edges. So instead of space between, I'm going to use space evenly. So space evenly. Refresh. Now I have an even spacing on all sides. So regardless of the size, it's going to give even spacing. And that's awesome. Like before Flexbox or Grid, you would have to use position, float, absolutes, which was like, it was such a headache to figure out how to do that. But Flexbox kind of solved all those problems for us, and position things really easily. Let's see, yeah. Let's go ahead and what I can also do is what I mean by the child properties. If you want to change the order number, like by default they're all going to be 0, and the higher the order number, the further right it's going to be pushed, I think. We'll find that out here in just a sec. So if I have my logo here, or actually no, that's not, because my logo is contained inside this anchor tag, so that's not going to work. I have to grab this specific anchor tag to change the order number because it's a direct child to the navbar, which has the property of flex. So I gave this anchor tag an ID of change, which, did I use that anywhere? I used it right here. I'm going to give it, or actually let me just show you underneath it. So if I grab that logo, I have to grab it by the anchor tag because that's the direct child to the navbar, and I gave it an ID of change, so I can do pound change, the name of the ID, and I say order, and let me give it a higher order number, so like 3. That should push it all the way to the right. So yeah, so now my logo is pushed all the way to the right. If I want it all the way to the left, it has to be lower than 0 because by default they all have 0, so -3 is lower than 0. Let me save that. And now the order number is pushed all the way over here to the left. If I want it, you know, the second one, what I can do is give home an order number of -2, and maybe give this one a -1, so it's in this spot right here. But I don't want to have to go through and give all these IDs and whatnot. But I just want to show you, you can change the order of your direct children of that parent by just giving it a different order number. By default, they're all going to be 0. The higher the order number, the further right it's going to be. The lower the number, if you go into negatives, the further left it's going to be. So if I just wanted to go back to the middle, I can just get rid of it, and it has its same order number. Save, and so now it should be back in the middle. So if I want to move around all these containers of my images, what is every direct child to this main tag here? Hello. Welcome, welcome from YouTube. You're kind of coming at the very end of this workshop, but yeah, well, you're more than welcome to join. But my question is, again, what is mains all its direct children? No problem, Dennis. Have a good one. Thank you for joining. Div. Yeah, exactly. So the div right here is a direct child to this main. This div is also a direct child to the main, and so is this div container, because they're all nested one container in. Yeah, I'll answer your question here in just a little bit. The workshop will be done, and then I'll go over styled components. But yeah, we're going over CSS for right now. So in order to apply the Flexbox property, I have to apply it to the parent, so that way each div container now I can move around. So I didn't really grab the main anywhere. So let's just grab it down here. I can grab it by the ID name, the pound main, or I can just grab it by the name of the tag, which is main. So if I say main, give the property of display and flex. Now Flexbox is applied to all those div containers because they're direct children. So if I go to refresh, everything is now kind of in a row, because by default Flexbox works in a row. I can change that back if I go in and apply a property flex direction. If I want it back into a column inside the parent, I can say, hey, change the flex direction to be a column. So now they're all back being stacked on top of each other. But I want them in a row, so I'm going to get rid of that. Refresh. So now they're lined up in a row. Now I want to kind of do the same properties as I did to my nav bar. So I want to give out some, I want to align the items to be in the center. I also want to give justify content like we did earlier. Content, hopefully I spelled that right. And I want to say space evenly, because that's the good one I like. Let's see what that does. Refresh. So now, awesome. I have even spacing in between each div container. And when I smash this lower, you see it's still given even spacing. But now they're kind of smashing together. And it's not, like if I was on a small cell phone, this is what it would look like. And you can't really see the other images, you have to scroll to the side. So this kind of goes back to that cheat sheet. Or actually, let me go to my flex wrap here. Instead of the items smashing together, now they're going to be brought onto a new line. So if I go into the parent, which is my main here, and say flex, is it flex wrap? Yeah, flex wrap. Flex wrap, give it a property of wrap. Now, instead of the items smashing together, they're going to start a new line and line up underneath it. So right before they're about to smash, the husky should go down to its new line. And now before the coffee and taco smash together, that's going to go down to a new line. So my website is a little bit more responsive. So if someone's like on a small tablet or something, it'll look like this and not be all smashed together. So that's the awesome property and values of Flexbox. It really is a lot of trial and error and just going in and practicing. Using that cheat sheet is going to be very good. He has a really good explanation on how Flexbox is used. I'll pass that into there. So if you want the Flexbox cheat sheet. But yeah, that's kind of all the major stuff I wanted to go over with you today. You can align the items, be at the top or bottom. The CSS doesn't matter what order you grab, edit the structure. Not necessarily. Like I said, Chantel, earlier with specificity, it just depends on how you're grabbing it. The order can matter, because if you grab it the same way and then later on in your CSS you're grabbing it that same way, the latter one will apply. But if you're grabbing it more specifically, it doesn't matter where it's in your CSS, that one will apply. So it does kind of matter, but it just really matters on how you're grabbing that element. The more specific you are on grabbing it, it's going to override the other styles you have applied to that. If you're grabbing it the same way, if you're grabbing it by the element, and then later on in your CSS you're grabbing that element again and applying other features, those are going to override because they come later in your CSS and you're grabbing it the same way. So yeah, it kind of matters. It just depends on how you're grabbing elements as well too. Does that answer your question, Chantal? Ah, perfect. Awesome. So, I mean, what we've gone over today, we've gone over text editors, HTML tags, attributes, how they're displayed, inline block elements, nested parent-to-child relationship, the box model, attributes, CSS, how to select, how to style, specificity, which we just went over there, Chantel, pseudo-classes, which is very important, the cheat sheet. Oh, let me give you, sorry, the cheat sheet for Flexbox. There's that cheat sheet for Flexbox. Oh wait, yeah, I just posted it. You click on that link on YouTube and you should be able to take you to that page. But that's this Flexbox cheat sheet. He has a really good documentation exactly on all the properties and how they work. And we went over Flexbox and as a beginner, if this is your first time joining a Code On event, I mean, I've pretty much opened a fire hose in front of your mouth and said, hey, drink this water, and just, blew it in your face. It's really, as a beginner, we went over a ton of concepts. I don't want you to come out of this workshop having a fancy web page to show off. I want you to understand these concepts, so when you go to free online tutorials like W3 Schools and you're going through their HTML section, hey, we've already done editors, basics, elements, attributes, paragraphs, styling, so you can continue your learning and go through some harder stuff if you want to. So this workshop is just for beginners to really get a good base on whatnot. Oh, my first tab. I'll send this out. This is my kind of. I'll send this out through Discord. So the guy over in YouTube here, you got to join our Discord community. Let me copy and paste that in there for you. And then I'll also, when I'm done here with this workshop, inside Discord, I'll paste this kind of PDF file that'll have these kind of examples and basics that I went over. But what I also wanted to show you is look up media queries. This is a good one, so that way you can style specifically on how a device, if like a small cell phone's looking at your web page, then you want to use a media query to change the style of those images so the images aren't taking the full size of a small cell phone. So I don't really have time to go over much of media queries because I did promise you I would show you how you would use a regular text editor and your code, but that link is great on a next step. If you want to take the step from beginner to intermediate, media queries is definitely a good place to start. So now if I have like all this code in CodePen, again, CodePen sets up your file structure for you. You don't have to link your CSS and JavaScript files. Let's say I wanted to take this code and paste it into my into an actual text editor. I just downloaded. I don't use my Windows computer for my code, but I'm going to try to make this work. So here's VS Code. I downloaded it and I just clicked on it, and this is what opens up. You can change the look if you want. There's a light, dark, or a high contrast theme. I like dark, so I'm going to stick with my dark theme. What I'm going to do is on my desktop here, I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to name it Coding Practice. Okay. And inside my text editor, I can use this Open Folder button. So if I open this, I go to my desktop, I find this folder, and I open that. Oops. I now want to select that folder. Now there's nothing in that folder because I haven't made anything yet. So what I can do inside my text editor here, I'm inside this Coding Practice folder. I'll hit this plus button for a new file. And I want to call this index, or you can name it whatever you want, but it has to end in .html. So it lets your text editor know, hey, this is an HTML file. And you can tell it's HTML because it has this cute little icon next to it. And inside my HTML, let me blow this up. Too big. everything that we've been coding inside CodePen goes in between your opening and closing body tags. So if I want a default kind of sample HTML file, what I can do is use the pound sign. If I just do pound, hit tab, it'll auto-complete an HTML kind of structure for me, where it says, hey, this doc type, this tag lets the web browser know, hey, this is an HTML document. This lets it know the language, which is English. The head tag here, the opening and head tag, this is all where my metadata goes. The really important one here to have is this one. This makes your code a little bit more responsive. It says, hey, whatever the viewport is of the user's using, make it the same initial scale. So it makes it a little bit responsive just having that. The title here can be whatever you want. So title of your document, so like my first web page. Now everything that we've coded in CodePen goes inside the body. We've been coding like we've been coding inside the body. That's everything that goes inside the body is what's displayed to the user or to the web browser. So if I want to go ahead and take all my HTML from top to bottom that I've been doing, I can grab it all, just copy, Control C if you're on Windows or Command C if you're on a Mac, go over to my text editor, and inside my body opening and closing tag, I'll paste that in there. Oops, I accidentally hit copy. Let me try that again. Copy, inside my body, paste that, and now I have all the code from my CodePen. And it's not saved because there's a circle. It doesn't auto-save it for me. You know it's saved if there's an X, so if I hit Command S to save, now that X is there, so I know that file is saved. Now if I want to see what this looks like in the web browser, what I can do as an easy way of doing it is if I just grab this tab and I drag it over into my Google Chrome, it'll open up that HTML file there for me. Now you can see it has none of my CSS because I haven't created my CSS file and linked it together. So in order to do that, inside my coding practice, I want to create a new file, call this styles.css. The .css is important. You can name this whatever you want. It doesn't have to be styles. It can be whatever you want, but generically best practice, your main HTML file should be called index, and your main CSS file should be called styles. So if I do styles.css, it knows this is a CSS file. So now like my CodePen, I can go grab all my CSS, copy that, go over to my text editor here, paste that into my CSS. It's not saved because there's that circle. If I do Control S or Command S if you're on a Mac, that'll save it. But now, when I go over here and I refresh, the styling isn't working. The reason why is because these two files aren't linked together. They're not communicating. This doesn't know that this file exists. We have to link these two files. So that's the nice thing about CodePen is it links that stuff for us, so we can just go in and start typing our HTML and start typing our CSS. So we have to link those files together. A link tag goes inside your HTML, and it goes inside the head area. So inside my head, in between my opening and closing head here, I need a link tag. So if I type link, hit tab, it'll autocomplete a link tag for me, and it's self-closing. What this does is this rel attribute is letting the link know this is style sheet. I'm linking to some sort of a style sheet, which I am. This href is going to point to where that CSS file is located. Because it's in the same folder, I don't need to, hop out, use a / to hop out of this. I just need to type in styles, the name of the file, styles.css. If I named it something different like cool.css, then this would have to be cool.css. But now this is communicating and it's linked to the CSS file. Hopefully, if I didn't mess up anything, when I refresh this, now I got my styles. So you have to have make sure that link tag goes inside your head, And you see this title, I gave it my first web page. You see up here in this tab, it says my first, well, if you could see it more if I had less tabs, it'd say my first web page because that's the title of the document. If I change that to be, hello, just go ahead and save that. Go over here and I refresh. Now that tab changed to hello. That's just the document. That's just the title. It goes in the tab here. So that's just a quick and easy way. What's awesome about CodePen is it links all your files, links everything together. If you wanted to link your JS file, you'd have to use a script tag, and you'd use that script tag at the bottom of your body. It would have to go right below your closing body tag, and it'd be the same type. You would do script, hit tab, and then you have to link it that way, which you can just Google search. We didn't do any JavaScript, so it doesn't matter. But a JavaScript link tag goes at the bottom above your body. Is it script? HTML link to Java. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm correct before I say that. Yeah, it is a script tag. So it'd be a script. The source would be the name of the file of your JS, and that has to go inside your opening tag. And that goes at the bottom of your HTML, because you want your CSS and your HTML to load before it looks at your JavaScript. So that script tag, script, would be right below all my code, but right above the closing body tag. And I have to do the attribute of source and point it to my, I don't know, javascript.js file if I had one. And that would link to your JavaScript. So yeah, any questions on how I did that real quick? Yeah, live extensions. I mean, a text editor is awesome. I mean, it has extensions. So like one good extension I would say is brackets. Is it brackets? Yeah, brackets. So it'll color code all your brackets for you. Extensions are awesome. It's added features you can add to your VS Code. Bracket would be one I would add as an extension. So all my brackets here would be different colors depending on where they're located. It's just visibly easier for you to see. But yeah, that's an extension portion of your VS Code, which is awesome. But yeah, any questions on how I did that from CodePen to my text editor? Sweet. Well, that is all the time I have. Wow, we're ending right on time. That's actually pretty awesome. Usually I'm over like 10 or 15 minutes trying to do Flexbox and stuff like that. But if you think of all the stuff we did today, from the beginning, as a beginner, we kind of did a web development overview. We learned about text editors. We used CodePen. We used, figure out how to use tags, elements, attributes, how they display as inline or block. We learned the box model. We jumped into CSS, how to grab things in style. We learned how to CSS Specificity, Pseudo-Classes, which are awesome, and then Flexbox. Once you understand Flexbox, I would move on to something like Grid. Grid's a little bit more harder, but yeah, I'll share the PDF. So let me go ahead and, where's my PDF located actually? Oh, there it is. So inside Discord, because I don't think the PDF will work inside the Zoom chat. Upload code on upload. So yeah, at the bottom of the code on inside a Discord, that'll have that little workshop that I went through. This video is being live broadcasted on YouTube. It will probably be up by next week. I want to not cut it up, but I want to give timestamps of when I went over stuff, so it's just not a full 3-hour long video. Got it. Awesome. Also, too, I'm going to post in here a survey. I know a lot of people already left, but if you are still here, where's my survey? There you are. I'm going to post this. This I can post in the Zoom chat. Click on that. Let me know how I did. Give me any pointers. I don't get offended. I'll also post that in Discord. Any questions on anything I've gone over today? If you're interested on where I work, I work at a coding school called DevPointLabs.com. Again, I'm not an instructor or TA for DevPoint Labs. DevPoint Labs. Jeez, if I could spell. DevPoint Labs. This is the coding school I work at. I handle admissions, so people preparing. We have a full-time course that's partnered with the University of Utah. We have a part-time course that's in the evenings. They're both 11 weeks long. Before joining any coding school or any coding boot camp, you should on your own definitely learn HTML, CSS. Like I said, W3 Schools is my favorite for free online tutorials. Go through the HTML, go through CSS. You shouldn't pay to learn HTML and CSS. You should learn this on your own because there's so many great free online tutorials. And then move on to a programming language like JavaScript and try to get a good beginner's base in this before joining any coding school so you can learn the harder concepts. My biggest word of advice is whatever school you're joining, whatever that first programming language is you're learning, obviously learn HTML, CSS first, learn that first programming language as much as possible. If it's Python, if it's JavaScript, Ruby, doesn't matter. Try to learn that as much as you can before joining the course. And if that course or school you're going to doesn't have prep work, that's a little bit of a red flag and alarming. You should be preparing before joining rather than going in and trying to pay to learn HTML and CSS. You don't need to do that. There's so many free online tutorials and things that you should be able to go through to learn that on your own. But if you are interested in our school, it's devpointlabs.com. You can look at our courses, the curriculum that we teach. We've had plenty of students come in with different backgrounds of truck driving, working at any department stores, and they want to make a transition into web development or programming in general. Web development is booming, and as things are more online and automated anyway, that's just more jobs for you. But it does take a lot of practice. It does take a lot of time and effort. It's like learning any other language in the world. If you want to learn French, you got to spend a lot of time understanding the syntax, the verbiage, being consecutive in how you learn it. Same thing with coding. You're learning a language to communicate with your computer. So the more consecutive you are, the more time you spend, the better skill set you're going to gain. So yeah, that's kind of my spiel, my word of advice for today. Any final questions or anything anyone would like to go over before I let you all go? Great. I do this once a month. So follow DevPoint Labs Instagram. Look on Eventbrite for Code On. I usually put it up about 3 weeks before I have an event. Again, I teach beginners HTML and CSS styled components. That's more into CSS, actual CSS and JavaScript. Yes, you can ask me for CSS. I didn't really go over that today. Let me see. Someone click on the CSS. Yeah, that's more using variables and properties for your CSS. That's a little bit deeper than the knowledge I went over today. So styled components, I don't really have that great of a knowledge into, but yeah, I did go over basic CSS. Go back through this YouTube video, kind of go back maybe an hour or two when I start with basic CSS. But styling your elements or whatnot, we went over that on how to select those elements and grab all that. But yeah, styled components are a little bit deeper. I'd probably pass you off to a TA or an instructor.